The courtroom was silent as Rick Harrison, the man behind the counter of the most famous pawn shop in America, was sentenced to life in prison for federal charges that shocked the nation: money laundering, artifact smuggling, and tax evasion.
You're sitting in a packed courtroom, tension so thick it feels like you can barely breathe. The cameras are rolling, reporters are whispering, everyone is staring forward, waiting for the judge to speak. And at the center of it all, Cory Harrison, son of Pawn Stars icon Rick Harrison, sits just rows away, eyes fixed on the bench as the judge prepares to deliver a sentence that will forever change the trajectory of his family. Quick question: how would you react if your father was sentenced to prison right in front of you? Would you be numb and silent, pass out like Cory did, or would you explode in outrage? Let us know in the comments. This wasn't supposed to be his moment. It was supposed to be Rick's, the patriarch, the man who built the Harrison name into a global brand. But in a twist no one saw coming, Cory ends up stealing the scene, not by intention, but by collapse. As the judge delivers the verdict against Rick, guilty, tied to the very same scandal that had already rocked the family to its core, you see Cory's body go limp. He doesn't scream, he doesn't cry, he just folds. A slow-motion fall from the courtroom bench that stuns even the most seasoned bailiffs. Because this wasn't just about a sentence, it was about watching a father fall from grace. And for Cory, the emotional weight was too much to bear. The whispers begin to ripple across the room. Is he okay? Did he pass out? Emergency medics rush in, pushing past reporters and court security. You watch as Cory is lifted and checked for signs of life. A man who had lived in the spotlight now lying unconscious on the floor under the full weight of public humiliation and personal devastation. The internet explodes. Social media clips the footage, spinning headlines like wildfire. But behind the drama, there's something raw and real happening. A son watching his father, mentor, and business icon fall from the pedestal he'd spent decades building. And this is only the beginning. You grew up thinking Rick Harrison was untouchable, a savvy businessman, a father figure, and a staple of American reality TV. He wasn't just the face of Pawn Stars, he was the brand. For years, viewers watched him negotiate deals, crack jokes, and steer the family pawn shop with iron focus and street-smart wisdom. But now, that same man is sitting on trial, shackled not by handcuffs, but by the consequences of everything he didn't see, or chose to ignore. As you sit there watching, you can't help but replay the past. This empire didn't build itself. Rick took a modest Las Vegas pawn shop and turned it into an international brand. You remember the episodes where he'd lecture Cory on responsibility, or how he'd flash a wry smile when he pulled off a smart buy. He was methodical, calculated, and business to the bone. But maybe, in chasing the deal, Rick overlooked something much bigger, because the allegations weren't minor. Authorities claimed Rick Harrison was involved, directly or indirectly, in financial misconduct tied to an international laundering scheme. The very pawn shop that made the Harrisons famous had become, according to prosecutors, a revolving door for illicit transactions masked as everyday deals. And as investigators dug deeper, a pattern emerged: high-value goods linked to foreign shell accounts, transactions that conveniently disappeared into paper trails too neat to be true. And now, here he was. No cameras, no clever edits, no producers pulling strings, just Rick Harrison, a man facing real time. The court's silence is deafening. The sentence has been read, the reality crashing down like a gavel slam echoing through generations. And just feet away, his son collapses, not from physical illness, but from emotional overload. Because when Rick fell, he didn't fall alone. This wasn't just a legal conviction, it was a generational collapse, one that would test everything the Harrisons had built and everything they believed about themselves. You didn't notice it at first, neither did Rick or Cory, but behind the scenes the feds were already watching. While the cameras of Pawn Stars rolled and fans lined up for selfies outside the shop, a very different lens had been fixed on the Harrisons, one that didn't miss a single transaction, wire transfer, or suspicious handshake. The FBI had been quietly building their case for months, maybe years, and you're starting to realize why. It started with the items, rare, expensive, and oddly frequent. High-value watches, untraceable jewelry, antique weapons with foggy origins. Cory accepted them as part of the job. Rick signed off on deals like he always had. But unknown to them, some of those items were breadcrumbs leading back to organized criminal enterprises. People who weren't just collectors but movers of dirty money. Pawn shops by nature operate in cash. It's part of what makes them appealing for fast deals, but that same feature makes them a magnet for crime. And that's what the FBI found when they traced funds linked to Rick Harrison's shop across international borders, funneled into foreign accounts, laundered clean through what looked like innocent transactions. You imagine the agents poring over financial records, decoding the layers of shell companies, bank hops, and strategic purchases. What began as a routine check into a few sketchy items had grown into something much bigger, an international money laundering scheme with Rick's name tied to the receipts. But here's what stings. The question wasn't just whether Rick was involved, it was how much he knew. Had he simply looked the other way? Had he gotten too comfortable? Or had ambition blurred the line between legal hustle and criminal cover? The FBI's timing was deliberate. They let it play out, let the business thrive, let the show roll, all while collecting a mountain of evidence. And then they struck. You've seen trials before, on TV, in movies, even in real-life court footage. But this one hits different. This isn't a random CEO, a shady hedge fund manager, or a politician with a secret. This is Rick Harrison. You're Rick Harrison. The face of Sunday marathons, pawnshop wisdom, and backroom deals turned teachable moments. But now, he's not the one holding the gavel of negotiation. He's the one sitting behind a defense table, in a tailored suit that suddenly looks too heavy for his shoulders. As the trial begins, the air in the courtroom is so tense you feel like you're holding your breath for him. Prosecutors don't waste time. They lay out a case that spans countries, currencies, and criminal syndicates, item after item, transaction after transaction, emails, wire transfers, bank accounts in countries you've only seen on a globe, and at the center of it all, Rick's name, Rick's shop, Rick's approval. They don't call him greedy, they don't have to. They paint a picture of a man so focused on growth, reputation, and staying at the top that he ignored what was happening beneath his own roof. To the jury, it sounds like a man who didn't need to know the details. He just needed the deals to keep flowing. They say the pawn shop became a washing machine for dirty money, and Rick let it spin. The defense counters hard. They remind everyone of Rick's clean record, his decades in business, his commitment to community. They argue he was duped, that the criminals used his legacy to their advantage, that he was a face, not a mastermind. But as the trial rolls on, the line between oversight and involvement blurs. The jury sees a man who either knew too much or asked too few questions, and the longer the prosecution speaks, the harder it becomes to believe Rick was simply naive. Every detail they reveal feels like another nail in the coffin, and you can see it on Cory's face, sitting behind his father, holding his breath, just like you. The verdict hasn't been read yet, but the walls are already closing in. You could hear a pin drop. The moment had arrived. The verdict. Cory sat motionless behind his father, his eyes sunken, shoulders stiff, a shell of the lively character fans once adored. Rick, stone-faced, waited for the jury's words like a man awaiting the edge of a sword, and then it came. We, the jury, find the defendant, Richard Kevin Harrison, guilty on all counts. In that instant, everything broke. Cory didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't speak. He just passed out. His body crumpled like a man who'd taken a bullet to the soul. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Medics rushed forward. The judge called for order, but order was already gone. The weight of legacy, betrayal, and shame had finally crushed him. For years, Cory had stood behind his father, on screen and in life. He believed in Rick, modeled himself after Rick, fought to earn his trust and one day lead the family empire. And now, the man who taught him everything was convicted of using that very empire as a cloak for organized crime. The collapse wasn't just emotional, it was symbolic. Rick Harrison was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his reputation shredded. The Pawn Stars brand took a devastating hit. Sponsors pulled out, viewers turned away. Tourists who once lined up outside the pawn shop now looked at it with suspicion. Employees left, investors bailed, and what was once a booming reality TV empire fell into eerie silence. Cory, after regaining consciousness, was escorted out the back of the courthouse, avoiding cameras but not reality. His role in the family business now felt like a curse. His name, once met with cheers, was now whispered with pity, and the legacy he hoped to inherit was gone, swallowed by greed, ignorance, and justice. What remained was a cautionary tale, a son who believed in his father, a father who lost his way, and an empire built on trust, destroyed in one sentence. The court had spoken. Rick Harrison was gone, convicted, sentenced, and escorted out under flashing lights and falling reputations. But the world outside didn't stop. It just changed. You now watch the aftermath unfold, not in real time, but in slow motion, like a car crash you can't look away from. Cory, left behind in a courtroom filled with echoes and empty stares, had to face a different kind of sentence. Public judgment, family disappointment, and the unraveling of everything he thought was forever. The Pawn Stars brand, once synonymous with hustle, grit, and Vegas charm, was now a cautionary tale wrapped in headlines, legal drama, and viral memes. The pawn shop didn't close, but it might as well have. Foot traffic dropped, producers paused plans, sponsors ghosted. And behind the counter, Cory stood alone, dealing with customers who once saw him as a TV star, now eyeing him like a suspect. Here's a real one for you. Do you think a person can bounce back after something like this? Yes, time heals everything. Maybe, but the trust is gone. No way. Once the fall happens, it's over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this isn't just a story about a fall from fame. It's about whether redemption is still possible in a world that loves to cancel louder than it forgives. Cory's name is still etched on the doors of that pawn shop. But the question now isn't about the price of gold or the value of a rare collectible. It's this: what's the cost of trust when it's lost in front of the entire world?